So this week's guest is an observer and catalyst, fluent in what's next for fitness globally. She has held senior roles with juggernaut Les Mills International and luxury lifestyle brand Equinox. As well as being a mother of 3, she's also a prolific blogger, sought-after speaker and mentor who contributes to business trends and women's forums. Today, we welcome Emma Barry to the Escape Your Limits podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Thanks. And you're the first sort of, kind of the first female that I've interviewed anyway. Yeah.
What? Thank you, I'm honoured.
Yeah, well, I've been putting out on LinkedIn, we want more women. And
well, I'll line some women up for you. There's some fantastic women out there.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was reading a report before this interview actually about there was a UK Active, I think, did a report in conjunction with some research agency, I don't know their name, and they were saying that over 80% of people that attend the boutique, whether it's in London, New York, LA, are female.
Correct. And similar stat for who has the spending power in the US as well.
Really?
Women spend 80% of whatever's spent in the household as well. So
really?
Yes, we're everywhere.
Yeah. And it was funny because another gentleman I interviewed probably about a month ago said, but based on that fact, that when you go to a lot of the industry trade shows, they're aging male, white male. That they're the people who run the companies, the people who are sort of around who are speaking. So it's interesting that there's probably not more people that represent the where the market's going that sort of are seen and have more of a say. What's your thoughts on that?
I think we're at the beginning of that evolution, so I agree with your observations. We spend a lot of time at the same conventions, and I'd say that observation is correct. So I also spend a lot of time in the women's forums, so there is a lot of energy around that right now, because there's actually a lot of women in middle management. There's a lot of women doing GFM roles and actually being personal trainers and things like that, but it just seems to be at the more senior level. So I think there are definitely some women peeking through, and I think that's definitely to come. And I think with the boutiques, which is interesting, and perhaps we'll get to this in the discussion as well, but a lot of the boutiques are not actually represented at many of the conventions that I go to because they've actually evolved separately. They had a guy with money, generally. They had someone who had a great idea, and they usually had a marketing person who thought, hey, no one's ever put these two things together, let's do this. So they've sort of grown up outside the industry. So I think there's a large representation of those women, and if we look right back to the Soul Cycle examples, a couple of women who, very, very senior and did a very good job. So I think some of that representation is not coming into the industry yet, but it's certainly out there.
Yeah, and one of the things I've noticed since I've came to the US is that there's what probably you and I have seen as what we call the industry, and then there also seems to be sort of other areas that are developing that wouldn't be the people probably that we usually hang around with are not part of that. There was an LA fitness show in January I went to, and I'd never seen, there was no brands I knew about, but there was a huge amount of people and young people that were attending, queuing around the sort of streets to get autographs with some of these sort of new fitness celebrities. What's your view on kind of the traditional side of the industry and this sort of new thing that's happening and these new people?
I think it's a mix of exciting and scary, and I've just come back from Filex in Australia actually with Bill Moore and the team down there, and I observed the same thing. So they had a massive show, very impressive expo, open to the public as well, and I saw this in full flight. So I'd go to the lectures during the day, and that would be all the industry, seniors like myself, and that lecturing to all the people who've come from classic clubs. And then when I went to the show, some of these brands from within the industry would be doing their stuff up on the main stage, and there'd be a few people there. But then some influencer, who you and I have never heard of, but our children would know, waltzes in, and there are just thousands of people everywhere. So we're definitely seeing a shift from instructor to influencer. So anyone who's got 500,000 people on Instagram, or they're on a YouTube channel that's very successful, they're certainly beginning to guide the trends a lot. And also you're getting people lifestyling. I feel at the moment we've got a lot of brands that are actually trying to come into each other. So we've got the health sector, we've got the fitness sector, we've got the boutique sector, some of which is from within the industry, some of it which is without. And then you've got other people just randomly, the yoga movement coming back in, which hasn't necessarily sat within fitness. So they've had their own conventions and yoga journals and things. So I think there's many examples of businesses sort of trying to climb into the general space of lifestyle. But I would agree with you. I'd say a lot of the influence is coming from outside the industry. However, we have the know-how, do you know what I mean? And you've got the equipment, and we've got some of that stuff. So when it can all come together, I think that's sort of a happy medium. But it's going to become a competitive space. And you and I were talking just before, we're about to get the big guys sort of come into as well. I know Apple have just launching their gym kit in Canada very shortly, for example. So
what's that gym kit then?
So there's a way that all the technology that Apple's been developing, you know, they've got HealthKit, obviously they've been watching and tracking our behaviour for a very long time, and I think there's a way for that to actually work in sync with all the equipment and in the way that people exercise within a club.
Right.
So I think, you know, and they will obviously launch what the full meaning of that is, but they're definitely beginning to make some, you know, some strong moves into health and wellness.
Right.
We know that, I just saw yesterday, Warren Buffett, for example, has announced, you know, his company is going to be coming into the healthcare sector as well. We know that Google is listening and watching and, you know, again, tracking all the behaviour, because we know that that system is broken, and we know that someone's going to need to serve our needs in that way. And I think in the next couple of years, there'll be some massive change. I expect that there'll be an Uber moment in the sense that a lot of the pain that we feel around price and convenience and can't be covered and all of those things are going to be solved by someone, you know, who's got the money and has got the data to be able to guide those, you know, what they deliver to us. Yeah.
So take us back a little bit about yourself. You know, briefly, how did you come into the industry and why, and what was it like at that time when you sort of got involved with in the early days?
Right, so, right back in my university days, so shout out to Otago, which in my day was the only place that you could go and be trained in physical education back in New Zealand. So came through that, and I mention it because there was an extraordinary amount of people from Otago University that were formative in the early days of Les Mills International. So when I was still a student, started teaching, was a personal trainer, and then sort of shifted through the ranks, moved up to Auckland, did group fitness management for Philip at the flagship club up there. And then, and really when I came into the industry there, it was mid or early 90s, and the clubs were sort of on the build, you know. Les Mills was a force in the city that I was living in, or all the cities throughout New Zealand. And group fitness was very popular, very high-low, and there was a lot of step, you know, from the 80s. We had all of that, and that was going very well. We were starting to sort of expand. We were definitely doing a lot of circuit training at that time, which was really popular. And sort of, I remember the theme at the day was sort of to go, well, we did a little bit of interval training, but long and slow was the way to sort of lose weight, you know, as opposed to now every millennial I know is doing 2 HIIT classes a day and, you know, all of this sort of thing. So came into the industry then, moved up to Auckland, and then once we launched Les Mills International in the mid-late 90s, we sort of launched about the same time that Johnny G and spinning was coming in. And actually, interestingly enough, Zumba wasn't far away. So
really?
All of those big brands were sort of evolving at that point. And people
so
were...
Les Mills were originally clubs, were they?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
In fact, Les Mills has just turned 50
right.
as a brand, a club brand. And that, of course, was started by Les Mills himself, who's Philip Mills' father, a great Olympian and 4-time mayor in Auckland City. So he and Colleen came in and ran the gyms, you know, so they opened these gyms, and Colleen was very good in pushing forward women's rights in those days. Like, she'd be the one walking across, you know, the old bikes and grabbing magazines and work harder, and you know, she was very, very, you know, shaped the female culture of gyms, particularly in New Zealand, but that was a trend at the time. So they came in, Philip went off to UCLA and came back with his concept around aerobics, which has more recently become group fitness. And really that has begun, you know, the 20 whatever programs Les Mills International is releasing now. So things, when I was coming into the industry, were beginning to get a little bit more hardcore, at least with Les Mills. So this long and slow aerobics, low impact, we were sort of beginning to challenge that and bring in some more intensity, bring in some different flavours. I remember when the jazz aerobic movement sort of became more athletic into something called jazzercise, jazzergetics, and we started lifting the intensity, lifting the impact, etc.
Right. And
then in 1990, pretty much, I think Philip came up with the idea of pump. which later became body pump. So this thought of there's a missing genre in the group fitness environment, which had always been a very powerful medium for Les Mills, was group. So group is in the top 10 trends today, but it's always been very powerful since Philip brought that into the brand, you know, way back when.
And do you think that, like, at the time, there was a lot of clubs opening at the time, and do you think that sort of concept fulfilled a need where there weren't probably that many Group X instructors about, and they needed to have some good programming in that? Do you think that was also, you know, that coming together, expansion of the industry, and then these guys with this solution, you know, really good quality program? Do you think that's kind of how that evolved as it did?
I think it really did. The business was really burgeoning then, as it is now with boutique fitness. So I think there was a definite need. There was an intoxication, like everyone wanted to be in this social environment. It was, I mean, we talk about the boutiques being the new going out. I think that was definitely that feeling back then. And I remember the Les Mills, we always used to get quoted in Auckland as being, you know, the social club of the city, the gay club of the city, the place where people would go and meet people, and the type of place that people would join and stay forever, because this is where you met everybody. And when I was living in Auckland, I couldn't think of not being a member. You just wouldn't see everybody, and you're investing in your health. So I think Les Mills did a very good job of creating that social environment, which we're seeing again in many iterations today. So I think there was it was on a set of trends. People knew that being healthy and fit, I mean, I remember when my parents used to smoke. I mean, Dad was a doctor, and all of a sudden they discovered that wasn't good for you. So then the smoking got replaced with something else. So, and it was very social. They were all out and wanting to go to clubs and be a part of something, and you know, the music was driving it, and there was a natural fervour, I think, in the industry there, and it was captured so nicely by the clubs.
And it's strange, really, because if you think about some of I'm going back into probably 15, 20 years ago, what they were doing then in terms of the music and the theatre on stage, it was very similar to what's actually happening now in these smaller boutique clubs, isn't it, really?
It really is, and look, what's old is new again, and you know, I do laugh, and you know, we've both been around a bunch of years now. You know, I'll talk to some of the little millennials, and they'll be like, oh, there's this new high-low dancey thing, there's 305, there's that, and I'm kind of like, that's like the 80s all over again. It's coming round, slightly different conversation, maybe a different combination with something else, but the human body, I mean, as you know, you guys specialise in functional movement. The body only moves in certain ways. We have a physical response to stuff, and we have an emotional response to stuff. So things like the martial arts and the dance and things that take us into a certain heart rate zone will give us those endorphins and that wonderful feeling and that yearning to return. And yet, you know, we work in the weights with strength. Look at the uprising of strength again, you know, through CrossFit, through a lot of the obstacle races that you have to be strong to pull your body up and over, a lot of the body weight training. So you look at these things and you see that they're not going to change because of the way we move and the way that we like to feel. Even with VR, everyone's just doing the same things but with a different mode of delivery, really.
Yeah. And do you think that's the key, is the delivery? Because a lot of as you say, CrossFit, that was the way, probably on a less intense level. I was training like that 30 years ago. High-low aerobics has been around forever. But the way that people are delivering this now has changed. We were talking earlier about the Propel event I went to at the weekend, where you now got people like Ludacris, you know, putting on a full show, and then you've got people doing circuit classes to a musician, almost like a pop concert combined with fitness event all in one. Do you think that's what's happening, is that people are now thinking about making it more entertaining? And with CrossFit you've got competitions, and with boutiques you've got more like sort of mini events and festivals combining. Do you think that's kind of where things are going?
100%, and I think the word here is relevance. So while the modes of exercise are somewhat similar, there might be different music, it might be different timed protocols, whatever it is, but what's relevant now is that my experience in life is very personalised. So whatever's coming through on my Facebook feed, on my Instagram, whatever I'm watching, I'm highly shaped by what my friends are watching, or what my age group is, or what I'm interested in, whichever phase of life I am. So if you look at the festivals, it is very cool right now to have a lifestyle brand, you know, and again, we've seen SoulCycle do that. I wear the t-shirt, I drink the water, I do the ride, I talk about it afterwards, and then for those that are providing an in-home experience, I'm likely to do that on my off days as well. I start to think like the brand. And I think if you go beyond your brand, because your brand can never be all things to all people, although I do watch a lot of people trying to do that, and I think that's going to be interesting. The other way to do that is to have a sprinkling of branded experiences. So the food that I might like to eat, the shakes that I might like, the music I might like to listen to, the HIIT classes that I might like to do. And it's quite easy to assimilate all those experiences for that very like-minded set of people. And I think that's definitely happening.
Right.
And we're seeing that in the festivals, we're seeing it in conventions, we're seeing it even in the boutiques are beginning to diversify their offering because they know that people want more and they want more of your mind space. So they want you to be thinking about them for more hours in the day, whether it's within the bricks and mortar or beyond, and drinking their drinks and eating their bars, and we're beginning to see all of that. And if you don't have that expertise, it really makes sense. And because boutiques have been so clear on their brand, it's very obvious who you should partner to.
Yeah.
If you're a boutique brand, you should partner with that person. If you're all about organics or being real and nature, you're going to go with that brand. So all of a sudden it's taking a lot of shape, and it can be very potent for an end user who then says, oh yes, I like all of those things, I'm going to that. And that's what you experience at the Propel event, I believe. It's just a whole lot of like-minded people with all the sorts of things that they're into. Yeah. And I had a very similar experience when I went to Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop event. Not quite related to fitness, but she's definitely in lifestyle and just making huge waves. You went along and there literally was the cooking things that you liked, and you're having your hair blown out, and you're meeting some of the celebrities. And so she had pitched it at this level, but again, it was just an example of that where you walked in and you felt at home, because these are all things that you are already doing in your own life, and they've just happened to have been brought together into one beautiful experience.
Yeah. So one of the things I am observing is you probably, in our younger days, it was very much you'd have one brand and they would do everything. So in fitness, it would be the brand on the water, on the food, on the entertainment, it would be one brand. Whereas now, particularly at this other event, and I heard a similar story in some of the boutiques in New York now, where it's more about collaboration. In fact, the Propel event was called Collab, funny enough, but it's you'll have whoever's the best coffee, sort of grinding, producing company making the coffee, and then you've got whoever does the best water and whoever does the best whatever it is. They seem to kind of be a combination of individual people that have, I guess, similar values, but their own entity, as opposed to a kind of mega brand that does everything. What's your thoughts on that?
I think the answer will be both. I mean, if we look at all the other brands who've been through this evolution that we just happen to be going through now, we're behind a lot of other businesses. If you look at the beer industry, if you look at retail, if you look at restaurants, we've gone from the down market food court through to the boutique eating experiences, right back to wow, now I can go to an amazing, I can go to Harrods or wherever it is and have a beautiful experience, again there. So I think we're going to see it swing back, and I think there is a way for the clubs in this example to get better at what we do, because really what's happened here is people have been serviced much better. They now know if I'm going to a cycling experience, the lights are going to be on, the instructor's going to be awesome, everything's, nothing's going to get in the way, nothing's going to be compromised in that experience. And I think in the clubs you kind of go in and you go through the turnstile and you could literally do 100 things, and that's a very diluted, and it's not a very strong proposition as an unmotivated member, if I even get as far as the gym. So I think we're going to see that. Now I do agree a little bit. I think if you aren't best in show and all of those things, I think it's much easier, and we're really beginning to see that. Exponential and other companies are really pulling together the best in show of stretch and bar and this and that, and pulling that together. Even our aggregates, if you think about it, the clubs in the sky, I can now go to the best of bar or the best of whatever and just kind of belong to that club in the sky that has everything. So my views would be, I think both are going to exist. I think you will have a collection, and then you will also have the clubs that get it right, at the end of the day, because it all costs money. Like, that's the other thing. People at some point are going to have to work out how much they're spending on all of these things each year, and it might actually, and it does make sense to belong to the club that is getting better at serving those needs. So we're beginning to see the clubs come back and you'll know this intimately, transfer some of the old school weights floors into something more functional, beautiful and well run. We're beginning to see that. I hardly ever go into a bad cycling studio now. The stadium, the lights, the cameras, the action, all of that, because people have worked out how to really hone that experience. So I think that's really good. We know that bar, yoga, all of these places have been doing this relatively well, and I think that's all been lifted now with, you know, with the boutique fitness as well. So I think it's going to go both ways, and I think if a club can double down and just really become valuable to their members and become a place to hang out, maximise third spaces, that's another thing that clubs can do. Perhaps if they have a bit more space, they can have more social ability to run stuff. And just have an honest look, you know, which of the touch points are not working, and either fix them or get someone in who does a better job. And we saw this, you know, Equinox did this a long time ago, brought Kiehl's in, you know, as the beauty product. Now everyone does it. You know, every boutique has a hand soap and a conditioner and stuff like that. So that was an easy and obvious thing to do, but
it was a nice example of where instead of it being Equinox, you know,
soap
face
or
it was bringing someone in that had a real great consumer presence, and you know, when I see both brands now, it kind of, you know, I think differently about them.
Well, that's it. I mean, Equinox is all about the high performance life, and Kiehl's is born in the laboratory. Like, you know, it's been thoughtfully engineered. So I think that's a great example of two things coming together. Yeah.
And so, and in terms of inside the clubs, then, do you think that clubs that probably offered everything, so they did yoga, they did spin, they did free weights, do you think that for them to be successful in this sort of new world, they've got to understand which ones of those they are able to sort of do really good? Because if you look at spin, for years everybody's done it, haven't they? You know, what makes a Soul Cycle at $40-50 a session different to what you get as part of your membership in another club? You know, how have they managed to charge so much for that same experience that you get for free?
Right. Well, I guess it's not the same perceived experience. So, and there's so much, if you look at all the touch points across any product or service. So, first of all, there's why they exist. So, I mean, really, if you look at Soul broke a lot of rules when it first launched in 2006. So, first of all, it was cycling faster than anyone thought was safe. They used silly little hand weights that everyone was poo-pooing. They had a different music model. They actually used instructors who weren't cyclists, you know, so they didn't go to the industry and say, hey, who's really good at riding a bike and let us teach you some charisma. They went the other way around and said, you know, here's a great person who's got amazing presence, and perhaps they're an actor or a stand-up comic or, you know, someone like that, and we will train what you need to do within that environment. And then to make it literally part therapy, like literally, because we know from cycling that people are trying to bust through and get into a certain zone to, you know, yes, burn calories and all of those sorts of things, but this is a way to do it very simply. You hop on a bike, you're sweating in 3 or 4 minutes. You know what I mean? There's not many other modes of exercise where you're doing that. So I think they captured, and also it's in a very closed and intimate environment. So from a real estate perspective, when you're trying to return on investment, it's one of the best bangs per buck if you think about it, because you're right, you know, in terms of people in a room. So I think, I think that's kind of how that sort of evolved.
Yeah, and because I don't know if this is true, you probably know, but apparently to be an instructor, you have to go in 10 weeks to learn how to be an instructor, I guess, on one product. Is that more or less accurate?
Look, it can be anything. It varies. It's widely varied. People who are delivering consistently every location, every time, there is more training involved. And so you'll hear people, startups, and they'll say, hey, we're going to go 2 months. I know in the early days of Soul it was 6 months, you know, and it'll be shorter now because you get better and you can't wait that long as you're scaling, but it can be all immersive, and we're also seeing a lot of blended models where there's a whole bunch of stuff where you're expected to know, and then when you come together you really are spending time learning the art in front of people and getting some wonderful feedback. So you know, that window could be 2 weeks, 2 weeks to several months, and it could be ongoing. In fact, the good ones will be ongoing, where you're constantly getting the team together. I came across a lot of the instructors in London recently, and a lot of who you would think are competing brands and boutiques and beautiful little micro clubs, they all get together once a week and they basically have their own little competition and see who's the biggest beast, and to remain motivated, because that's the other thing. We forget that people who are in fitness, they're actually at work too, and it's easy to sometimes lose your own motivation when you're teaching the same thing day in and day out, and to have your own goals and to keep fit, you know, with your peer group, which is actually the people that are delivering those experiences. So I think that's sort of interesting. And sorry, I just realised I didn't answer your earlier question. So what can clubs do? really you need to think about how do you, and it is more complex, and your comms team in any club will know that. There's only so many messages we can bombard the members with any day. With you're a boutique, one conversation. Are you coming to the cycle class today at 4 or not? Or is it going to be 6:30, So I think, you have to think about what's the marketing, what's the product? How good is it? Like, does the product stand alone? Is it an amazing product that people are just like, I love that class, I just feel amazing and I'm getting results? So you've got to come back to that. Then it's the delivery. Who's delivering it? And is it the same here? There'll always be instructor differences. And if you think about it, Soul does a great job, and many of the brands, Barry's, all the ones that have great charisma teachers, you know that you go to that guy because he's the rock guy. You go to that girl because she's the EDM girl, or she'll get in your head girl, or that one's just going to deliver the energy. So they still have those nuances, but there's a base level that's high.
Right.
And that's what gives the perspective to the member or the person who's attending that they're getting a very high quality specialised workout. So clubs just have to get better at all the pieces. I think that's it. But in the end, you're going to compete on price. I know that I have a car park at a club. I know that I have a locker at the club. I know that I have a shower at the club. And I know that if you do the social pieces really well, and if you do each of the genre of the exercises very well, I'll keep coming. But there's about 85% of people who go to a boutique who also shop elsewhere. There's about, I think the stat is something like about 28% of a club owner, and these are very, very general, broad stats, will shop around. So who knows where that's all going to settle, and every country I go to is a little bit different. I'd say LA and New York are sort of leading those things. I'd say London's in the fire right now, like it's a frenzy over there of real estate. I'm sure you feel that when you're there. It's like, who's going to get that little food shop, which brand's going in there? And then just being down in Australasia last week, I think they're definitely feeling much more the value-based chains, the budget clubs. And the boutiques are beginning to come. I know that Barry's is on its way to Sydney, but they haven't, and F45, of course, being Australian is very prevalent, but that's sort of at the beginning of that fervour.
Right, okay. Yeah. And what about from the instructors? Like, it sounds, from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, is that clubs are having to almost decide to be a little bit more narrow focused in what they're doing in order to at least meet the level that people are aware of, so just to get to the table, you've got to raise your game, and then to go above and be a leader, you've probably got to choose, well, where am I going to specialise? Do you think that's the same as the instructor? Because instructors years ago, they'd be doing step, they'd be doing pump, they'd be doing a bit on the gym floor, and they'd probably, in most cases, not be paid too well for what they were doing. I know nowadays they've got the ability to earn more. Would you say instructors have got to, or should be thinking about how they can become almost like, outstanding at a few smaller areas, do you think?
There's definitely been a shift from that. So along with moving from instructor to influencer, there's definitely been from generalist to specialist, and that's sort of coming through from a different piece of research actually, which is really showing where the people part is evolving to. So I think there's definitely a call for that, to be famous for something or to just to do fewer things but better. Now, the whole perception around boutiques is that they are specialists. Now, there are some club chains and some clubs that deliver very well, but they are not perceived to be the specialists because they do many things. So I think some of that name calling is not fair, but it is what it is for the members. So you just always got to go with the perception. So I'd say yes, specialise. There's also a shift towards people wanting to be considered partners or entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs within a bigger organisation rather than just someone who's teaching a class for you. So we're definitely feeling more collaboration, more camaraderie within clubs and also boutiques that are working really well. The people have to be on board. That culture has to be instilled, and it needs to be a consistent experience whether you're in the room or not as the owner or the manager.
Yeah. And I guess that's quite a challenge if you think of opening hundreds of locations, if that's the goal. But it's a very unique and individual experience that's essentially reliant on those individuals, whereas the gyms, the big box gyms, were mainly a lot of equipment, you go in DIY, and it was really the brand and the equipment that made it work. Now, it's a people business. Is that how you're seeing it? Yeah,
it's definitely a people business. It always has been, I think, but I think it's more prevalent now. And I think there's going to be pressures, just with you saying people going into a club. I go into lots of clubs and people are actually working off an app. There are plenty of people in clubs working out with Kayla,
Right.
which is fascinating because that's kind of a mix of both. So we're not using your content, I'm using your facility. And then of course we're seeing this absolute flood of products into home now. So with Peloton leading the charge, Fly Anywhere, HIIT, I know out of London's just launching. So there's a lot of, and of course any app and anything that's streamed, online, virtual, on demand, all of these things to me sit on the same continuum in a way, which is delivering to that convenience is the new currency, really, as a consumer. And again, I like the analogy of food. So at the moment, I might go to a nice restaurant. I might go to a crap restaurant that I know is going to be quick and fast. I might get my ingredients delivered. I might get my shopping delivered. I might shop at all of that stuff exists. And I really just swan through my life on what is convenient on the particular day. So I think fitness is going to go through that writing period. And then I think we're going to find our preferences. And then I think we're going to hunker down a little bit. But like you said, would you go again to the Propel event? Absolutely, right? Because it was worth getting out of bed for. So if your club is good enough and you really want to be there for the social and the vibe and something that, 100 people or 50 people in the room can't generate, you're definitely going to turn up for that. But are there going to be the odd days that I want to work out at home? Absolutely. Yeah. Kids might be sick, just can't be bothered putting a face of makeup on, whatever it is. Or I just really like, I'm not very good at dancing, I might just start doing this dance app, or I might do this virtual class or whatever it is until I get good enough. And we did a bunch of research, I remember, at Les Mills, where self-efficacy is a massive thing. So, and I think there is a misconception around virtual. People are like, I would never do that. You can never replace an instructor. But you can get pretty damn close, would be my experience. By the time you put up a brilliant person, they're on a beautiful big screen, it's been beautifully filmed, you've got two options there, you know what calories you're burning if that's of interest to you, and you get beautiful coaching. So that's all there. And now it's not live, but it's still a very, very engaging experience if you're just trying to get your exercise in for the week,
Right.
So that was something that was quite interesting for me because I thought there's no way I'm going to enjoy this. And I ended up enjoying it way more than I thought, mainly in an immersive environment, but also I enjoy that at home. I'd much rather do that at home than do nothing at all, which is often the alternative and the break in motivation. Right. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, I've noticed that. So particularly with the boutique, if we talk about that for the moment, the environment is, in a lot of cases, it's amazing. The music, the sound, but certainly the trainer part can differ, particularly as you know some of the more developing markets where it's probably not as easy to get a pool of trainers. I guess if you go into London or New York, there's probably a lot of people to pull from. But when you start expanding internationally, you mentioned Australasia, I guess that is probably a little bit more challenging to kind of get that pool of talent as easy. Would you agree?
It definitely is, and I think there's a relative scale that has to be applied, and I think anyone who's scaling has to acknowledge this, because not only do you not get a New York instructor in the middle of America, nor would you want one. It has to be relative to that environment, but where there are standards of perhaps education or delivery or sexiness, whatever the things are that your brand is trying to represent, those things can get tired. And also the other thing is you've got competition. So you're not the only game in town now. There are a lot of people willing to pay a lot of money. And I've actually been at conventions where the influencers don't even turn up. They're not going to turn up and teach some class for 10 people or 20 people or 30 people. Like, are you kidding me? I only get out of bed for a line of hundreds or 2,000 or the 10,000 or 12,000 that turned up at the Rose Bowl for Kayla last time she was in town. So the game is changing, and I think that's as challenging as ever. And the good thing for instructors is that because they were sort of held under a lot of exclusivity for a long time, so not traditionally well paid. Some brands paid well, but most didn't. So it wasn't really a career, it was the thing you did for the love. But now there are other mechanisms, and there's definitely entrepreneurship in that. Like, people are, you can have your own website, your own YouTube channel, you can be selling your own things or get sponsorships and things like that. So I think there's a lot of that as well, which is sort of happening from the people aspect.
Yeah. Do you think some of the traditional fitness brands, you think they will start collaborating more with these influencers that have got a huge impact? I interviewed a guy last week, and he had a combine of about 4 million people socially. So if this guy says you need to drink this or to do this workout, he's got so much influence. What's your thoughts on that sort of coming together?
I think some will and some won't. I think it has to be a brand fit for you. So I've observed some of the big brands have done that. And remember, this is sort of similar. It's sort of being a replacement to the celebrity endorsement, I think.
Right,
I was just listening on another podcast the other day around 24 and their relationship with the Olympic Games, for example. So that's an example of, obviously hooking up with a fairly big institution and sort of making that work in their way. And I think influencers are the same, in many ways, the same thing. I know that David Patchell-Evans in Canada, has done an exclusive with Gillian Michaels, for example, and that appears to, and what I've seen, I haven't spoken to him recently, but that appears to have been a really positive thing where you're using a brand that isn't your own, that is well known by people, that drives people to move because they follow Gillian and love Gillian. So I think you'll continue to see that. The influencers, I think some are a little bit wary because in some cases their brand in some parts of the segment will be bigger, and I think that's quite a scary thing. And also, like managing any celebrity, you have to manage the downside as well as the upside, so I think that's always in people's minds, but we're definitely seeing that happening more. Yeah,
and with that, again, reading something the other day, but the influence of these influences is huge, but in some cases the background of the information compared to a big fitness brand that spends a lot of time researching and developing exactly what they're going to do, and then you could have arguably people just put up an Instagram channel and start doing fitness and manage to get a lot of followers, and then they're influencing people on what to do and why. What's your views on that in terms of what's being delivered? Because I guess most people, it's very difficult to know what to do and what not to do. You look in there online or in any papers or anything or in magazines, and you kind of get conflicting information about everything, whether it's diet or fitness. One person said you should train high reps, and another person low reps, and heavy and light, and fats and no fats. So everything's conflicting. What's your thoughts in terms of having people that probably haven't got or haven't researched as deeply as some of the traditional fitness companies or brands, and what should people do?
I think it's a really great question, and we're sort of getting schooled in the marketing hype, and there were many apps launched off a great pair of legs and a personal trainer boyfriend like that. Right. That was there was a lot of that coming to market, and I think they will level out in time, but I think there's a couple of lessons here. One is, I think this is where the industry can play a role if we are doing good research, but then it has to be expressed in a way that is intoxicating and magnetic for the person consuming it. And I think we have to grow up and learn that lesson as an industry, because telling people the facts clearly hasn't worked. We're still not touching most of the people in the world, and the need's getting greater by the day. So I think there is the actual marketing of that research, which I think we have to get better at. And then I think from the, what do you do, there is so much conflicting information. I mean, goodness, try and work out what you're supposed to eat. Which diet are you supposed to be on? I mean, it's crazy. And there's a very good point which came out of the forecast by the Equinox Health Advisory Board, so some pretty smart people on that board. But they came out with something, I think it was John Berardi that came out with it from Precision Nutrition. So he said, data is going to get really useful, and we're going to be able to use AI, the bots, whatever, to be able to mine a lot of data that's going to help us find things that is just too confusing and too much volume for us to work through as humans. And from that, we'll actually get some distilled, clearer messages about stuff. Like if you just look at all the research that's ever been done on, which is the best diet for the best body type, for which sex, all of these things. So I think that will happen. So I think AI and tech will be able to enhance some of those messages. And then I think there is some good research that's being put out there, and again I lean into Les Mills because I follow them, but there's some wonderful studies that are being done. All those programs are researched, they're actually done in a lab to see what the response is on the body. And I think bringing that sort of stuff to light in comparison will call out some of the things that are potentially not great for the industry. But I think there'll be a writing period. Like all the influencers are having a day right now, but I think there has to be an amalgamation, but we must learn from them, and that fashion is cool too, and people will blindly follow their heroes. But there has to be some responsibility that comes with that. And my observation of those that have developed apps and programs is that they have got better. Right. I think they've launched and they've gone, woohoo, this is it, and then they've got feedback. Don't think they haven't got feedback behind the scenes, and then they've sort of brought in someone else, or someone started helping write programs or whatever. So I've definitely seen that.
I would agree. I spoke to Gunnar recently about the same question, and he said I guess the positive thing is it's getting, if anything that gets more people moving is a good thing, and then over time, like you said, if you can then start to, if they do start having influence and they do start collaborating with people, which can just tighten up on some of those areas, then it's probably not a bad thing, I guess. And working out in the home for people who probably would never go into the gym, if this app, this digital way of working out is good, then we've got to be going in the right direction, I suppose.
And we also have to accept it because it's happening. It's happening, guys. You're not going to stop that train. So it's kind of get on it and get on it fast. And I talk a lot about, fortunate to be a part of a lot of trend panels, and we talk a lot about being nimble and being ready, because there's a lot of stuff that's going to come at us that we don't know about now, but you've kind of got to be ready to pivot. And like you say, the fact that more people are aware of fitness, the fact that fitness is actually a status symbol now, that people are actually looking, I can wear my gym gear all day long, these are good things because it's more eyes on healthy living. And the fact that we're getting a wider array, it's not just the skinny models that are now, being referenced. There's a whole array of people, all colours, sexualities, everything is on show right now. So I think that whole rising up of the industry is nothing but positive. Yeah.
And what's your thoughts on that? I'll just, you mentioned it's just coming to my mind about the role of an instructor or trainer. There's obviously lots of different body types now, and on social media you can kind of choose who you want to follow. As someone who's influencing people to get in shape, should an instructor look the part? Should there be role model instructors that don't necessarily look the part, but they're getting people involved in it? What's the role of an instructor in terms of how they should present themselves?
An instructor is there to inspire their audience, whoever that is, to do more, really, and to be more, and to really evolve as a person. So again, that comes back to brand, and there'll be some branded decisions. And I realise it's a very controversial and political question that you're asking me, but that does come down to serving your audience. And if your audience is to serve people, then people will be your audience. If you do happen to be, a club that's focused on youth, or focused on serving the needs of an older population or something like that, then your role models should reflect that. If it's an open, anyone, anything goes, then that will be reflected. So I think it will change a little bit, but I definitely feel an opening up of that whole discussion, just as we're watching the model world change, the makeup world change, the fashion world change, and sort of evolve as we evolve as a species as well. And I think for the longest time we've motivated the motivated, and I think so clearly what we've done hasn't been 100% successful, so these are all mechanisms in order to reach a greater audience. So I think your instructor really is to inspire people to be more, and to come back more, and to move and make better decisions, and to be a really important part in that behavioural change. And I think therefore instructors will come in all sorts of shapes and sizes.
And I guess that's an opportunity for the trainers as well, because if you think, as you said, in most cases, in most imagery, it's the sort of six-pack trainer, as an example. We've even used that in our stuff, to be honest, but it's a six-pack trainer motivating that segment. And as an industry, we've always struggled to kind of increase the percentage of the people that are coming into the market. I know the low costs have done a great job of getting first timers. Even a lot of the clubs, partners we work with here, are still going into lots of cities and bringing in members who have never been into health clubs before. So I guess that's a good thing. But I suppose on a trainer perspective, if you are a trainer and you can, through technology, you can really target a niche type of people that are just similar to yourself, similar interests, whether that's fitness interests or whatever, then I guess that opens a lot of opportunities, rather than you having the sort of stereotypical view of what fitness people look like. I guess you can say, well, look, I'm going to be the person who's just after, guys who live in Texas and are interested in cowboy caps. I'm not but as an example, and you've got an opportunity to create a whole business and story, and your whole look, your dress, your brand association around that could potentially work. So I suppose in the same ways that the boutiques are doing that, which is really focusing on lots of micro markets, I guess as a trainer you could probably do that as well, would you think?
Yeah, I really do. I think there's an audience for everyone, and I think there's room for everyone. And I think, whether you're at this end of the market, and whatever you're offering is, I think I want to know what a cowboy cap looks like. What does a cowboy cap look like?
There's a name for them, isn't there, I guess?
I love it.
So
But no, I
that's my
agree with
words.
you. I think boutique everything, boutique events, boutique in the way, because really this is a customer service model. It's about end to end, how can I make each point really potent so I don't lose your interest and that you want to come back again, that yearning to return. And I think, if you know, and you've got to be really honest, you know, who am I and what have I got to offer and who do I naturally attract? And I think that's fascinating too. Sometimes your target market is not who you thought it was, but whoever you're attracting, that's a good thing. And just to maybe double down on that, yeah.
Yeah. I think like I say, I've had that and seen and read about that debate, but I think now more than ever, it really gives you the opportunity to create your own authentic following, and if you are doing something yourself that you believe in and you're transforming and you've got the ability to lead other people, then that story in itself is a great one that you can use. So I suppose it doesn't, just because you don't fit into a certain norm doesn't mean that you've not got the ability to really make, you know, to do something quite I guess significant in your own way.
Absolutely, and I think with the ease in which, well, let's see what happens with Facebook, but you know, the ease in which you can advertise socially now, you know, you really can have that conversation in a very pointed way, which I think is fascinating. I think just returning to the gym comment and the six pack, and it's a bit of a catch-22 because, I mean, we both know when it comes to choosing the picture, you can use someone who's real or you can use someone who's aspirational, and at the end of the day, you still know what is going to turn product. So I think we get a little bit caught in what is going to sell, and I know that we had this argument definitely at Les Mills over and over again, definitely at Equinox. You know, there's a certain look and feel that we definitely had with those both of those brands because it was expected, because it turned sales, because it was on brand. You know, so I think it's more difficult when you're in a club environment and you're being held to that. But perhaps this is where the influencers can come in, because there are some influencers who do come in different shapes and sizes and have a different dialogue and are big enough to be able to challenge the status quo. But at the end of the day, as you know, everything turns into sales. And so if it doesn't sell something, you have to find a way to turn that conversation. We had the same question actually with respect to objectifying women at a recent women's panel in Sydney, and it was kind of like, you know, what are we going to do to sort of take away all those images, you know, high heels and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And it was the same sort of conversation. It's very hard to get out of that because some of you are holding it to it and some are wanting to be more progressive, but it might not be where your brand is. So it's a very tricky conversation.
But I guess now, I suppose the opportunity over that is that we are all different, and I think if you look at brands in any industry, whether it's the coffee with Starbucks, whether it's food with the McDonald's, now in both of those industries, certainly coffee in Australia, I heard where all that started, but the boutique coffee shop that makes the fantastic coffees, I believe that started in Australia, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like Starbucks is a dirty word down under.
And they didn't succeed there in the same way as they've done.
No, it didn't,
else.
because quite frankly, they'd already had a boutique business in coffee, so it was great coffee, already had a community around it, and was serving its members. And people don't need to jump onto a chain or someone else coming in and offering that if they're already getting what they need. And I think the need in America was needed because the coffee here was so bad. Frankly, you know.
But I think the point I was trying to make is that there has been in many business the sort of the big corporate that does everything, and kind of everybody, because they've got the ability to dominate everything, then that's really the only choice you've got. If you're not listed, then you're not visible, whether that's in the clothing apparel market, and certainly around Southern California now, you're seeing all these boutique clothing brands that are fitness clothing brands that have managed to break through because of the power of social media. So now, actually, I quite like that because that's worn by people that are like me, that have a similar story and background. And so I do think, sort of coming back to the original point, then some people like the high heel, short skirt look. Some people don't. Well, now you can pick whatever you want, I suppose. And if you happen to believe in something, you can create a business for people like you. And I guess technology in the world today allows many more people to do that.
Absolutely.
And so do you think that is going to be something that the big companies have really got to sort of be aware of in terms of where things are going? Have they got to... Is that a potential risk to their model going forward, do you think?
I think it definitely is, and I think there's a lot of thought going into that and a lot of research, and a lot of the clubs are doing some really decent segmentation of their audiences now. So whether that be in terms of what you like you might come in and just want to train on your own and do some of the hardcore stuff. I might like to come in and actually go do either group fitness or maybe do some small group training, and I love to come to social events. You might hate them, so we might get served up completely different menus from the same club, and we're beginning to see a lot of that happening, and I think that's necessary, because at the end of the day, and we know this from the phone culture, personalised. I have my apps, I follow my things, I get my feed, and I think that has to be the same within the club. But you also have to double down on the benefits of the club. The benefits are you're a social club, you've got lots of facilities, you've got space. You're going to have to keep reinvesting in how you envisage that experience for your members. But I think just customising is going to help, and even just watching the payment model. Yes, I was paying $34 for a Soul Cycle class. Then I'm going, crap, this is getting expensive. By the time I'm going 3 times a week, can I do, more sessions or whatever? Can I do more sessions? Oh, I may as well go unlimited. And you'll notice that a lot of the boutiques are actually doing like either a fortnight or a monthly model, because I do believe that a lot of them do want you to come, and they know that if you don't come regularly, it's just going to be another flash in the pan and another person who had a great idea and lost interest. So I think part of that's the intention, but also the financial model. If you're living class to class, that's a pretty hard way to talk to your bank about, so, as we all know. So, and I think the membership model is going to come back, but this time there's going to be a lot more value attributed to it, because people just hate that your account being pinged every month if they're not perceiving the value.
Yeah.
If I'm going 3 times a week and I love it, I love my instructors, I've got the body and the energy that I'm looking for, and I will pay that. And I just think that was a large part that the boutique market had to teach us, because I don't know about you, but I can spend an extraordinary amount of money on my car, and it annoys me, but I don't think of it like I do for, how much am I paying at my gym membership? Like, we've got to change our perception. This is our body, this is our health, our vessel. This is what we get to travel through this life with, and I don't think that's been in the right value. And we haven't done as good a job as we should have in the clubs for people to see and feel that value. But if you take away those social elements and the 4 classes that you love a week, your personal trainer, which you adore, all of these things, that becomes something. And the place that you eat 3 times a week because the food's great and whatever, that becomes an interesting proposition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to finish off on your sort of career progression, Les Mills, you left Les Mills and you came to America.
Came to America, actually, won green cards and came here with Les Mills, and then I was very fortunate to work for Equinox for 3 years, Director of Group Fitness Programming with an incredible team, and delivering group fitness products over those years. So yeah, amazing, just incredible brand, and it's always the brand that's up on the slide in every marketing, every market point to it, every convention in the world as how to do it. So just an incredible brand that actually delivers through on what it promises, and I think that's probably the biggest difference between Equinox and others. Is a lot of people are trying to be something, but Equinox actually has all the processes in place to deliver on that. All the way through.
Why do you think they did that? Because I joined one, it was local to here, and one of the things I noticed is just when you joined, the follow-ups, the different programs, trying the yoga, trying the Pilates, the personal training, just the, I guess, feeling of being noticed in the gym and outside the gym kind of overwhelmed me a little bit. What do you think contributes to them sort of being, I guess, one, they're very successful, and 2, it seems as though that service is part of that. What do you think are some of the ingredients that they have that have kind of continued to make them as successful as what they are?
Well, I think they were founded correctly. I think that the Erico siblings, when they founded it, pitched it in a way, and it evolved very nicely from that. So it was always about high performance living. It was always around surprise and delight, like really understanding a member, and it's an affluent member, so you've got more margin to play with. So it's a member who's willing to be a part of that community, who's expecting, is an A-type typically, who's has a good role, is active in the community, etc., and demands a lot from life. So when you go in with those expectations, you build everything accordingly. And then I think your experience of joining the club, there is a lot of effort put into each of those things. There is nothing, think about it, they always offered spa services. There was always juicing from day one. Like a lot of those things that have come in, 20 years later, 25, 27 years later, were already baked into the DNA of Equinox when it was founded. And then I think year on year, just doubling down on each of those services. So hire the best people, build the best systems, create the best programs, invest in innovation. And a lot of people say they're innovative. Innovation's expensive, having worked for 2 brands that innovate, because you've got to work on stuff that hasn't been decided yet and it isn't cool yet. And so everyone who says, oh, we're innovative and you're doing HIT training, well, I'm sorry, but HIT is not a new trend. And that was you're in the middle of a trend, that will shift fairly soon. But, so I think doubling down on innovation, hiring the best people, but also not being of the industry. So you'll notice that Equinox looks to the best businesses in the world. They hire the Four Seasons people, they hire people from top magazines, top creatives who've come from the world. And I know a lot of businesses are doing this now, but they've really looked outside the industry, knowing that we're a young industry, knowing that you're not going to get inspiration from within if you're, already the best in that industry. So always challenging. And just having great minds thinking about the next thing. I referenced the Health Advisory Board before. Those guys help guide the high performance life in a very eclectic way. So, sleep and, health people and functional medicine and, a lot of stuff that's surrounding fitness, but will influence it in the end, and luxury lifestyle brand, not a gym.
And what is it they're doing on the instructor side? Someone told me at the weekend that they kind of have these hubs where they bring different trainers together. Is that?
Yeah, there's a very strong mechanism for training instructors, selecting instructors, developing instructors, career pathing for instructors. So all of that stuff that you'll see in any great business is evident in that business as well. And it's hard to do because the fitness industry is very flaky, it's very young, and we behave very young. So this is a grown-up organisation who looks after its people and develops people in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the next move for you then?
So I'm out around the world again, so I'm very excited to be consulting. That's why I see you every other weekend. Speaking at the main conferences. So I was born in London and lived or brought up in New Zealand, so I'm just sort of exploring that whole area in between, really. But I tend to do the big fitness shows. I'll speak at those and also do a lot of learning. So got trips coming up to China, I guess, do a bit of stuff in the US, a lot of work into Europe right now. So on the speaking circuit, writing a bunch, so there's a lot of publications and books being published in the boutique space across group fitness, trends, women in fitness, women who influence, all of those sorts of forums I'm pretty active in. And then I mentor some people on the side, and then I work on some projects. So I'm sort of doing a bunch of stuff which really suits my experience, having travelled so extensively with both brands actually, and that is my great love, is to travel and just to share what I'm seeing, and then to work with people in depth as they sort of pull down those ideas to express their own brand. So really I'm a foot up the butt for people, to get on with it. So that's sort of what I'm famous for helping people with, is sort of helping them either clarify what they're doing or getting clear on their project and putting some energy behind it.
Yeah. So you've got a huge amount of experience and knowledge, I guess. What sort of companies do you look for in terms of partners to work with? Are you looking going forward?
To be honest, I only do passion projects now, so something that I really get a feel for. Now that doesn't, because I've worked all over the industry, it doesn't necessarily mean one part of the sector. So right now I do have clients, a couple of boutiques, premium, and then I'm also at the value-based end and also equipment. So, much like you, people will come to me and say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think this would be good for a group fitness experience? Because everyone looks at group fitness and think, wow, I'm going to make $1 trillion doing this because every club's going to want this, because they have no idea how hard it is to sell into a whole lot of people who don't want to be like anyone else. You're laughing because you know what I'm talking about. I'm sort of all over the industry there. So passion, I have to believe in the product. And each year I'm trying to influence more people, I think, to serve more people. So I try to have a mix of projects which touch some people, but also some projects that touch millions of people as well, because I think that's a better use of my time, in order to being able to serve more people.
So where can people find you if they want?
So they can find me, so website emmabarry.com, and I'm on social medias, so I do Facebook shout outs, either live or a film segment on Sunday afternoons, so that's Emma Barry, and I have a public page for that as well. Instagram, Emma CC Barry.
Right, okay. So last two questions before we finish then.
Great.
So what's your thoughts or predictions on where the industry's going? I know it's difficult, but in general terms, what do you think are some of the ideas or general direction that we're moving that people can probably take away from this interview?
Great, and we've touched on a little bit of this throughout. So I think people, so there has definitely been a shift from instructor to influencer. So I think we can now publish ourselves, write ourselves, all of these things. We can be the brand that we want to see in the world. We can speak to the people that we want to speak to in the world. So I think that's definitely a shift. If we are a part of a bigger organisation, I think there's a definite call to action for employers, to include people in that much more. I want to be a partner with you. I don't want to be your employee. I want to contribute ideas and newness to your business as well. So to be an entrepreneur rather than an entrepreneur on the outside, maybe I can do that for you. So I think there's all of those shifts. I definitely will be more mobile. I do half my life out of a coffee shop now in different parts of the country, and I love it. I'm in the mix. I feel like I'm in the world, not just in some corporate box now. So I think all of that's going to become a lot more fluid. Online, offline learning, education becoming democratised. So I think the whole people space is evolving. I would also, this is a great time for us to become more human. So expect that the AI and the bots are going to take away a lot of the mundane. They're going to take away a lot of the stuff that they're suited towards, and we're going to be able to be more connective, more entertaining, more behavioural change focused. So those sorts of things, I'd say, for people to sort of double down on those skill sets, particularly when you're face to face with people, because there's going to be a big call for that. So that's the people side. We already talked a little bit about technology. I think in terms of segments, I think we're definitely going to see a coming together of wellness, health and fitness. And I do think that the big guys in the next couple of years are going to do some pretty big stuff. We know that Apple, we know that Amazon is delivering everything, whether it's a hard good or whether it's a soft good, and they're buying up their, they now deliver my Whole Foods groceries, and, where's the world coming to? And then I think Google and also Warren Buffett also announced yesterday that they're getting into the healthcare company system as well. So I think expect an Uber moment, I think, around healthcare, because it's too expensive, it's not working, the whole country's going to be brought to its knees around it. So someone's going to solve that because they now have the data to inform it and they now know how to serve that need. So I think all of that's coming. I think there will be a comeback for clubs. So people are like, what's going to happen with the clubs? So yes, we have to lift our game. We have to become much more relevant. And I think that's a really key word. It's got to be personalised to me. You need to give me what I need when I need it, whether that's in a club space, at a festival, at home, on an off day. What are all my choices around my lifestyle? So I think there's a real opportunity there for the clubs to rise into that space. Maybe look at some dead wood and cut that out, and maybe do some things that the boutiques can't do. I think
what sort of things like?
Well, I think you have space on your side. You have the fact that you have a larger community, and while that looks like a disadvantage now, as everyone's sort of segmented off into their little pieces that they want to do, in the end, it will come round again, and there'll be a broader conversation around that in the same way that we operate in communities. So, and then I would look outside the sector, look out into every other business that has gone through exactly what we're going through now and is 5 or 10 or 20 years ahead, and there'll be some inkling there as to what we need to do as well. And then I would say use your influencers, look at the currency of now. And that is, what are people interested in? And maybe if you come from another era, or if you've come from another school of thought, maybe be open to new ways that people are doing stuff. And if something's selling, then sometimes you just have to sort of look and go, oh, interesting, and kind of shape things towards that, I think.
Right.
So some things that are coming anyway.
Yeah, okay. And then final question, Escape Your Limits is about doing things or doing something that you probably believed yourself wasn't possible, and then going ahead and making it possible, whether that's you or society or friends or whatever. What would be a good example of where you've escaped your own personal limits?
Great. So the big one for me, and we're united on this one, was in 2013 we got a call from a strange American woman basically saying that we'd won green cards and we'd need to fill out some paperwork, which was about that thick. And I thought it was a sham, so I kept hanging up on her, and then finally worked out that it was for real. So we decided in 2014 to move our family to the United States, which at the time was terrifying. So I remember the call to my father, and we're moving to the States. That was it. I know that you can relate to that. And then when I told my friends, I said, look, hey, we're really excited, we're going to move to the States. And they were like, oh, that's so exciting for you, but I could never do it. And I hated the fear that was in their eyes, and that has sort of set me on this next part of my journey, which is really helping people overstep or step into the unknown a little bit if they know that there's something left inside. So that was a defining moment for me. We had 3 children, life was comfortable, nice house, nice area, good job, all of that stuff. Life was looking good, and we decided to sort of uproot and essentially start again. So it was quite a big moment, but from that I have heard from many people that I've spoken to that has given them some inspiration to take a step that they have known that they've needed to take, whether it's in business or moving or shifting or moving on for a relationship or into another one, whatever. It has been a bit of an impetus. So it was huge at the time, and we're really glad that we did it, because we've had so much amazing experiences that would not have happened. And just being in New Zealand last week, it was beautiful. It will always be home. It's an amazing country, and it was just amazing to see how many experiences we had in between visits. Quite inspiring. And look, we'll go back there and we'll spend time there. But just, there's a big world out there, and never be scared. But there will be that moment where you have to let go and reach for another shore.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Emma, thanks. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate your time.
Thank
Best
you.
of wishes for everything you're doing, and we'll
Thank
hopefully
you so
see you
much.
again soon.
No doubt.
Thank you. Cheers. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.